Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvelously well. Today we're going to be talking to Mr. Matt McQueen about his top 10 tips to be a successful studio owner. Matt, how are you?
I'm well, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. What I love about what you do is you, as you were talking about earlier, you had a home studio and then you had the opportunity to move into a space. So you have experienced the home studio owner transition into being, I suppose, a commercial studio owner now. So I thought, what better a person than you to ask about what you believe are the most important tips for a studio owner?
Yeah, that's right. I started out, basically as a hobbyist several years ago. Really even as early back as 2003, 2004 in my dorm room, just playing around with software and an interface on a computer that I had built. And it was that for years and years. It's just because I was a guitar player and because I was in bands, it was just a side hobby. And then it turned into inviting bands and artists over to my house. And then once I finally got the space, it was still doing stuff on the side and for free or for just enough money to pay the light bills. And then eventually it turned into I didn't have enough time to balance the clients here between the regular job and so just started charging more and more until it became a full-time gig a couple of years ago.
Well, that's amazing. I think you are a wonderful example then of somebody who's turned this into a successful career. So without further ado, let's go down your top 10 tips. So number one, I see you wrote a workhorse pair of large diaphragm condensers.
So we're talking about getting a pair of workhorse large diaphragm condenser microphones. First of all, what do I mean by that? I'm calling it a workhorse pair because you can use it on multiple sources and get good results, and it also has a lot of features to be able to help you to engineer the sounds that you want to get. So the ones that I'm recommending are these Shure KSM 44s, and when you buy them, they come with the shock mount, and you'll also get one of these clips right here. This is particularly useful for me because I use these to close mic my toms. I think that condenser microphones sound great on the top of a tom, and part of the reason that I like that is because yes, you do maybe deal with a little bit more bleed, but the bleed is prettier if you're going to leave it in. And so that's why I like to use these. These microphones also, they feature a 3-position selectable polar pattern, and then on the back you've got no low cut or a soft low cut, and then a more aggressive low cut, and then you also have a 15 dB pad. So they've got a lot of features. They're also not so expensive that to buy a pair of these would really break the bank for most people. They are $1,000 a piece, but they're also not so affordable that you either A, don't get a lot of features, or B, would question whether or not they are a high quality microphone. So get yourself a pair of workhorse large diaphragm condenser microphones.
So that was great for number one. I love that idea. I too am a fan of having a good quality pair of stereo condensers. You can use them in all kinds of situations. So what is number two?
Tools. You got to have tools to set up guitars and a toolkit to take care of little things. So let me show you what I've got. One thing that I love to keep around the studio is toolkits, and I have a bunch of them. These are my screwdriver kit. I love to keep these mini screwdrivers around, and then this is a guitar repair toolkit that has radius gauges and depth gauges and files and Allen wrenches and everything that you would need to do a guitar setup. If you take the time to learn how to do basic intonation and basic setup, you can really save a session. Sometimes you'll have a guitar player come to your studio and you'll notice that there are chords that just are not ringing out the way that they're supposed to be, or the last thing that you want is a buzz in an acoustic guitar part or electric guitar part to ruin the part that you're trying to record. And by knowing how to use these tools and keeping them around, you can really save a session and keep things progressing forward and not have unwanted noises from poorly intonated or badly set up guitars in your recordings.
So number three, I see written down here, I think is a really, really important one. I could even put this at the beginning or the end, because ultimately you want your client to feel comfortable in your studio.
For this next tip, we are stepping out of the control room at my studio and into the kitchen. One way that you can ensure your success as a recording studio owner is by keeping beverages on hand to show your hospitality to your clients, to show that you care about their immediate needs. And so I like to keep simply bottled water on hand at the studio. I have a coffee maker. I've got this electric kettle. And then in the drawer below, I have a nice selection of teas. We've got some chamomile here and of course some stevia. No English breakfast tea though in that drawer. And I'm sure Warren, you would agree that I need to get some of that for the studio. But we also have a French press, and then one step further that you can go is by keeping some over-the-counter medication on hand at the studio. And so I've got some acetaminophen and ibuprofen. We've got a bottle of antacids here, and then of course allergy pills I've found are actually pretty helpful for allergy season in Tennessee to make sure that I don't have a vocalist that's extra stuffy that day. So you can go really far and you can really help to propel your success by making sure that your client's immediate needs are cared for. You don't want to have an artist sitting around with some sort of physical discomfort, whether they're thirsty or they've got a headache, and their focus is shifted towards that and away from the task at hand, which is making music. There we go.
So number 4, it's very close to my heart, hard drives. And the reason why is because for the longest time, people would always tease me about backing up all my stuff onto multiple hard drives. Like when we make albums, they should be on 2 hard drives at all times. And then, especially if somebody else is mixing, a backup of the final on a 3rd hard drive. So it's in 3 hard drives. And for the longest time, people used to say to me, you don't need to do that. You should just store it into the cloud. Then, of course, rather famously, there was a company who had thousands and thousands of people's projects, millions of songs, completely erased. That was all on the cloud. And I knew a lot of people lost their work. So I definitely believe in backing up to multiple places.
One surefire way to ruin your reputation as a recording and mixing engineer is to not properly back up your sessions. You don't want to do that. Storage is so cheap now that there's really not an excuse to buy enough hard drives to back up your projects at least 3 times. That's what any IT professional is going to recommend that you do. And I've heard so many stories, just like what Warren was talking about, that putting it in the cloud, man, that's a scary thing, and I've heard so many stories of people losing their projects because they've backed it up into the cloud. A couple of the hard drives that I use are this LACIE Rugged to travel with. This is a great hard drive because the rubber on the outside protects it in your backpack. This is also a fantastic one because this is a little SANDISK solid-state drive. It's USB 3, and it's super fast, which Pro Tools really likes. Also, if you're doing any video work, you can put that on that hard drive, and it works great. So storage is cheap, and one way to be successful at owning a recording studio is to make sure that you are making that purchase and keep enough hard drives around to keep all of your stuff backed up and safe.
So number 5 is super important.
This is a really big one. For the first couple of years that I ran my studio, I was terrible at this, but you should get some sort of invoicing software. And the one that I recommend and use for all of my clients is Wave Apps. Wave Apps are fantastic. You can go to their website, and what's great about Wave Apps is not only can you store all of your customer information, their business email address and their contact number and all the projects that you've done with them, and you can look and see how much money this client has spent with you, but you can also invoice them and they can pay it directly with a credit card. There is a fee associated with that, but to actually use the tools, there's no monthly fee or anything, just a small fee every time they process a payment. But what is also really fantastic is that you can record cash and check payments. So if you have a client that doesn't pay you via a credit card, through the invoice that you email to them directly, you can actually take their cash payment and check payment and then record that and attach it to the invoice that you've already made for them. So it's super convenient. You can keep track of all of your books, and you can attach your PayPal and multiple bank accounts to Wave. So I have my savings account, my business checking account, my personal checking account, my PayPal account, all synced to my Wave apps, so I know where all of the money coming in and going out of my business, what it all looks like.
So number 6, this is imperative, this one. A great headphone mix for the singers, the musicians, because they're inspired by what they hear.
Exactly, yeah. And I think it also goes back to a couple of points ago, you want to make sure that they're comfortable and that they're hearing everything that they need, and that's going to help them be relaxed and perform. So what I'm going to do is show you what I use to help me achieve that. As much as I love having guitars and amps and pedals and microphones all over the studio, this has to be one of my favorite devices for the studio. This is a HEARBACK remote, and what this allows you to do is you can send 1 stereo and 6 mono sources to this thing, or you can send 4 pairs of stereo mixes to this device. It has 2 headphone outputs on it. It also has a couple of line outputs if you wanted to connect it to some speakers for some reason. And I have 6 of these in my studio. It's great for tracking a band live because then the guitar player and the bass player and the drummer don't all have to share the same mix. They can all get the mix that they want to. So usually I'm sending down a stereo mix of the drums, and then I've got another channel dedicated to the click and another channel dedicated to the scratch tracks and another channel dedicated to the bass and the guitar player. And when you're tracking a band live, this is a lifesaver, and your clients will love you for having this because they can get the mix tailored to their exact needs, and it's super easy to use. That's why this one is my favorite. It's not the newest, it doesn't have the most features, but it's very simple, and you can put board tape on the side of it and neatly label it, and it's as simple as turning up volume knobs. So usually I'll give a client a 1 minute, if that, orientation on how to use this thing, and then I never have to deal with people not hearing what they don't want to hear, which is a huge bonus because if your clients can hear what they want to hear, you're going to get great performances out of them.
All right, this one's close to my heart, and I'm actually sitting in the solution at the moment. A chair, either A, without arms, or B, that you can take up and down.
Oh yeah, I've got both too, and I think I can't imagine working in a studio with a chair that's got arms to knock into stuff. So, and I've got a couple of different things that, oh yeah, for guitars, I got a couple of different things that I want to show you. Okay, this tip is super important. We want to be comfortable in the studio for long sessions when we're going to be tracking for a long time. But when you're working with a band, sometimes you've got to move around a lot. I have my console over here, and then I also have this small cart that has my keyboard and my monitor controller and my mouse on it, and then behind me I've got the outboard gear, and you also never know when you're going to have a guitar player hand you an instrument and you're going to have to tune it. So you want to get a chair that doesn't have arms on it. I think that's really important, and that swivels. You know, this is these are simple tips. You know, this is a very simple thing, but at the same time, this is hugely, hugely important to being successful because you want to be comfortable, but you also want to have a really good workflow where you can move around.
Number 8. This one's interesting because you're saying a DI box, but you've also wrote reamp box as well. So, which I understand, but I know you have a unique way of working.
What I use in my studio is an Avalon U5, and then I also use this Radial X amp. This is a great, fantastic piece of gear. It sounds good going back into the amplifier. It sounds like you're plugging a guitar straight into the amplifier. The part of this that's different is how I do it. Normally, you would hook up to your DI box and you would have your guitar going in and a cable going out to your interface, and then you would use the through jack of the DI to go in to the guitar amplifier. I don't do that. Instead, what I do is I set up an output on the DI channel that I'm recording into Pro Tools and have that coming in to the reamping box. Then what I can do is I'm simultaneously recording the DI and the guitar track just like you would normally, but if I need to make a few edits, I simply unarm the DI track, make my edits, and then reprint by using the DI track that I already have in Pro Tools, reprint my electric guitar track with my edits in place. So I do this every section of the song as we're working on tracking the guitars, and then by the time you finish tracking guitars, all of your guitar tracks are edited, and it makes it really, really good. The other piece of gear that I want to talk about really briefly in this is the FREDENSTEIN RAMDI. This is great because you can actually simultaneously hook up all of this for $200, and this isn't like a sales pitch or anything. This is just a great piece of gear, and I just recently got it. It has the DI and the reamping box built into it, and there's just a little tiny switch on the front where you can turn the guitar DI off, and now it's just being sent to the guitar amplifier without having to change anything.
This is a good one, and I think this one is like the sort of differentiator, isn't it? Where you move from like your small home setup to when you start adding gear, you will need a patch bay.
Most of the tips on our list are centered around workflow in your studio, and that is really important to be a successful recording studio owner. And this one, it's no different. If you're going to build a successful recording studio business, at some point, you are going to need to build yourself a patch bay. Even if you start with one of the simpler 48-point 1U rack spaces that you can patch gear into, it's going to be so helpful in speeding up your workflow. This spaghetti mess behind me, that is our patch bay, and it is definitely the heartbeat of the studio. What the patch bay allows you to do is you have all of your inputs and all of your outputs connected to those patch points, and without having to crawl behind anything, you can simply make a short cable connection from the output of one device to the input of another device, and then come from that output back into your interface. And it opens up a whole world of opportunity. It's not just for being able to swap and interconnect different pieces of gear in your studio. Maybe you want this EQ before this compressor, or now you've decided to put this compressor on the snare drum and you weren't compressing it at first, and now you want to be able to do that. But the other thing that a lot of people don't consider when you're talking about a patch bay is, while you're tracking, it can let you get creative with things like parallel compression. I have mults built into my patch bay, and I can also double patch things so that I can record, for example, a pair of room microphones with no compression. But if you want to, you can also use your patch bay to be able to send those same drum room microphones to a stereo compressor, and then you can simultaneously track those room mics compressed and uncompressed and make the decision either later on when you're mixing, do I like them compressed? Do I not like them compressed? Or you could blend them together and have parallel compression during the tracking stage, and that is very cool.
Number 10, this is a big one. Tuners, whether they be clip-on or pedal tuners. But also I see you have the drum dial listed here, which is one of my favorite things in the world. But this last thing here is the TUNEBOT, which I actually, off the top of my head, don't know what that is.
Having a myriad of tuners in your studio will help you in making sure that all of your instruments, whether they're electrified or not, are in tune. But I want to go one step further than that when we're talking about tuners for your studio, and I want to talk about the TUNEBOT. This is a little clip-on tuner. It clips right onto the edge of one of your drums, and that's what it's for. It's for tuning drums. And the reason that I think this is so important is because drum tuning was probably one of my weakest areas when I first started my studio 7 years ago. I had no clue what I was doing. I put microphones in front of them, and however they sounded is how they sounded. And if you want to be a successful recording studio owner, having drums that are tuned properly for whatever genre of music you're recording is a game changer. That is really going to make your recordings sound next level, to be able to have the drums be in tune and work for the song without having to lean on samples. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it will make your recordings better, and your clients will be much more excited if the drums sound correct while you're actually recording the song.
Matt, thank you ever so much. It was absolutely amazing. I appreciate all the detail that you went into here as well. It's always great to have you on the channel, and make sure you're back in a couple of weeks. I want to do some more of these. These are a lot of fun.
I would love to. Thanks for having me on the channel.
Marvelous. If you have any questions and comments for Matt, please leave them below. Of course, down below, you will see a link to Matt's channel as well. Go and subscribe. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing.